This is section 4.4a, part 1. Here we're going to be looking at parallel and perpendicular lines. So let's do some definitions. A definition of a parallel line are lines in a coordinate system that never intersect. So here we have two lines, they're parallel to each other, and they're never going to intersect each other. They also have identical slope. Okay, so notice that they're rising and falling at the same rate. So here we have m is equal to negative 3 over 5, and this other one is also going to be n is equal to negative 3 over 5. Perpendicular lines form a right angle when they intersect. So here and here, if you look here, this would be a right angle. So those are perpendicular lines. Also in the coordinate system, the x and y axis are at perpendicular lines to each other. Okay, so they form 90-degree angles. If the slope of one is a over b, then the other one is going to be flipped with the sign changed. So negative b over a. This is called negative reciprocals. Reciprocal means a fraction that's flipped, and negative means that you've changed the sign. So negative reciprocals. Okay. If you were to multiply them together, then the slope would, or then the product would be negative 1. So for example, here we have an m1 is equal to 2. That's a whole number, so we can write that as 2 over 1. If we were going to flip this, that gives us 1 over 2. And then if we're going to change the sign, right now this is positive. If we change the sign, it becomes negative. So the negative reciprocal is negative 1 over 2. And if we notice, that's our m2. Okay? It's the same, negative 1 over 2. If we were going to multiply them together, 2 over 1 times negative 1 over 2, that ends up giving us 2 times negative 1, we get negative 2. 1 times 2, we get 2. So that equals negative 1 when you simplify. So anytime you multiply negative reciprocals together, the answer is negative 1. All right. So now we have a bunch of slopes. Okay, here's a series of slopes. And we have to determine if they're parallel. So the shorthand symbol for parallel is two little parallel lines like this. Perpendicular, the shorthand symbol is an upside down T like this. Or neither. So they're not parallel, they're not perpendicular. So we're going to look at our slopes. So for parallel, we want identical slopes. For perpendicular, we want negative reciprocal slopes. So here we have 6 and we have 18 over 3. Well, at first glance, these might not look like anything. However, we can simplify 18 over 3. 18 over 3 becomes 6. So now we have slope of m1 is 6 and m2 is 6. These slopes are identical. So identical slopes means parallel. Let's look at another example. Here we have 3 and we have 1/3. So we can't simplify a third. This is a reciprocal. So remember, whole number, this is like over 1. 3 over 1 and 1 over 3, these are reciprocals. However, this is positive, this is positive. So it's not a negative reciprocal. So they're not identical, they're not negative reciprocals, so this one is neither. Okay. Here we have 7, which is a whole number, so 7 over 1. And then we have negative 1 over 7. So 7 over 1, if we flipped it, would become 1 over 7. This one's positive, this one's negative, so it's a negative reciprocal. So this is perpendicular. It's flipped and it has the sign changed. All right, then we're going to compare 1 over 4 and 0.25. So here we're comparing a fraction and a decimal. if we take 1 over 4, we convert it to a decimal, it becomes 0.25. So now we have 0.25 compared to 0.25. So this is parallel. Okay. Next, we have M1 is undefined and M2 is 0. So this one's a little bit tricky. Okay. So you have to remember that M1 undefined is a vertical line. Okay, you have to remember that from our lesson when we talked about horizontal and vertical lines. And a slope of 0 is a horizontal line. So if we draw a vertical line and a horizontal line, these, it's like our axis, they meet at a 90-degree angle. Okay, so a vertical line and a horizontal line are negative reciprocals. So this is going to be perpendicular to each other. Okay. So this is, so they're going to be perpendicular. So these are our final answers for these questions. All right, so now you're going to go to page 181 and you're going to do number 1, A to K. And in that question, you're going to be saying, are these parallel, perpendicular, neither, similar to what we just did here? And then you'll come back for part 2.